AITA for asking my GF not to call her estranged husband's family her in-laws. It was a Saturday night, and Emma and I were sitting in her cozy living room, binge watching our favorite show. I glanced over at her and couldn't help but smile. After everything she'd been through, seeing her laugh at the ridiculous plot twists was a sight that warmed my heart. Emma had been married once before, something I'd always known, but a reality that sometimes felt like an ever-present shadow in our relationship. She had been separated from her husband for 2 years, the divorce still tangled in endless paperwork. From what she'd told me, the marriage had been over long before that. Yet his family, her in-laws, as she still called them, remained an integral part of her life. I couldn't fully understand it. She no longer spoke to him, and their relationship was barely mentioned, unless it was about some legal update. Yet every now and then, she'd get a call or a text from his mother or sister, chatting away as though nothing had changed. The words, "my mother-in-law," would slip from her lips as easily as if they were still married. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd been a part of that family for nearly a decade, longer than we had even known each other. I figured that habit and comfort tied her to those words. But as time passed, it started to gnaw at me. Every time she mentioned them as her in-laws, it felt like a reminder that I was still the other guy, the man who came after the life she once shared with him. That night, after her phone buzzed with a text from her sister-in-law, I finally felt it bubble over. "Emma," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can we talk about something?" She paused the show and turned to me, concern flickering across her face. "Sure, what's up?" I hesitated. I didn't want to make this a bigger deal than it needed to be. I loved her, and the last thing I wanted was to hurt her or make her feel like I didn't understand. But I couldn't shake the feeling anymore. "I know you're still close with your ex's family," I started, choosing my words carefully. "But it's hard for me when you call them your in-laws. I know it's just a label, but it feels like a part of your old life is still hanging over us." Emma blinked, her face softening into an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm not still hung up on him if that's what you're worried about," she said, her voice quiet. "I know you're not," I assured her. "I know you've moved on, but it's like when you call them your in-laws, it feels like you're still connected to that part of your past, like we're stuck in some limbo where you're half here with me and half there with them." She was silent for a moment, her gaze drifting to the coffee table. I could see the gears turning in her head, processing what I'd said. I didn't know if I'd gone too far or if she was about to tell me I was being unreasonable. The seconds felt like hours. "I get it," she finally said, her voice soft. "But they've been in my life for so long, it's hard to think of them any other way. They were there for me when the things with him fell apart. His mom, his sister, they were like my family when I had no one else. It's not about him, it's about them." I hadn't expected that. My frustration ebbed away, replaced by a pang of guilt. I hadn't thought about how much they meant to her outside of her marriage. In my mind, they were tied to her ex, a lingering part of her old life. But to her, they were people who had loved her through one of the most difficult times in her life. "I didn't realize it was like that," I said softly, reaching for her hand. It's hard for me to hear, you know? It makes me feel like I'm not fully your family now, like there's still a piece of your heart back there." Emma squeezed my hand. "You are my family," she said, her eyes locking with mine. "You and me, we're building something new. But that doesn't erase the people who were there for me when everything else fell apart. It's hard for me to just cut them off." I nodded, understanding a little better now. It wasn't about holding on to her marriage. It was about holding on to the relationships she had forged within that marriage. Relationships that had helped her survive the heartbreak. "I don't want to make you feel like you have to choose," I said. "I just needed you to know how it makes me feel. Maybe we can figure out a way to move forward that works for both of us." Emma smiled, and the tension between us began to fade. "We'll figure it out," she said. "I don't want to hurt you. You mean too much to me." As the night wore on, we talked more about it. We didn't come up with a perfect solution, but we listened to each other, and that was enough for now. I knew this wasn't something that would be fixed overnight, but the fact that we could talk about it, that we could work through it together, that's what mattered. Maybe I was an asshole for bringing it up in the first place. Maybe I was just insecure. But as Emma curled up beside me again, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized that what we had was worth working for, even if it meant navigating the complexities of her past. And in that moment, it felt like we were starting to write our own story, one where we could figure out what family meant to us together.